All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Arts Alliance webinar. Thank you for being here. For those of you that have been on previous webinars, you know that we like to start these briefings with a performance. We're grateful to have Emily Hooper Lansana with us today. Emily is a cultural worker, director, arts administrator, educator, and performing artist. She currently serves as Director of Community Arts for the Logan Center for the Arts at the University of Chicago. She has a story prepared for us that she's graciously sharing with us. Emily, I'm gonna unmute you.
Great. Greetings, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to share my work with you. I do a lot of work with performance of folk tales, and so I want to give thanks to the ancestors of all of the cultures that are represented here today. This particular story, when it came to me, I don't know the original cultural origin, but it's a story that touched me, and I hope it will touch you all as well. So the story says that once there was an island, and on this island, all of the virtues were living together in harmony. So there was peace, and there was justice, and there was truth, and it was a good place to be. All was good. And then, as happens in life and as we are experiencing now, suddenly, seemingly out of nowhere, there came a storm, a terrible storm, and they realized that they would not survive on the island and that they needed to get away from the island as quickly as possible. And so they were jumping into boats and rafts and just moving away. And so it happened that the very last one left on the island was Love, because she had been so busy making sure that all of the others made it to safety. And when she realized that she was the only one left, that there were no more boats, no more rafts, she worried about how she might make the journey to safety. And so she looked around and she went toward the edge of the island, and she saw a big boat coming by, and she waved her arms frantically and called out, "Hey, can you make room for me?" This boat was so big that it seemed to just shake the water. And she called out, she said, "Power, I know that there's got to be some space on that boat for me." And Power just kept on moving, didn't even look her way. So she's wondering and beginning to feel a little frantic now, and she looks out even further across the water, and she sees a boat kind of coming close, and she sees sparkles off the boat, and she recognizes immediately, "Oh, hey, Wealth, you've got stacks of silver and gold. Surely you must have space for me. Come close and let me ride with you." And the boat just kept on going. She's looking now and wondering, what will happen? Will I die here alone? Will no one remember me? When suddenly she sees a boat that seems to dance across the top of the water. And as she watches this boat dance, she thinks, "I know this is my passage to safety." She calls out, "Beauty, Love and beauty, we have walked hand in hand. Please make a way for me." And Beauty just keeps on going. It's like, "You're not even gonna rock my boat." And there she is. Now she's sure that she will die alone. The storm is becoming bigger and bigger, and the wind is blowing, and she can barely hold her own, when suddenly this rickety boat that doesn't even seem like it should be able to hold its own on the water comes by, swoops her up, and carries her to safety. When she lands, she turns around to say thank you. And when she turns around, the boat is gone. And the first one who walks by is Wisdom. And she calls out, "Wisdom, did you see who brought me here? I didn't get a chance." And Wisdom says, "Well, yes, of course. That was Time." And we know this because Time is the only one who truly understands the meaning of love. So I wanted to share that story today because I think that for many of us in this moment, we are struggling because we are used to having an understanding about how time moves. We are used to being able to hold the ones that we love close. And this is a moment where our experience with and our experience with love have to take a different shape. And so I wanted to offer that story to you as a gift so that we might hold the ones we love in a different way, and that we might understand that time isn't moving in the way that we're used to it moving, but certainly there is a space for us in the moment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily. That was an extraordinarily generous story to share with us, and I think just a very important message for us to remember at this time. Thanks so much for being here today. Again, everyone, my name is Jimmy. I'm the Communications and Marketing Manager for Arts Alliance Illinois. I want to thank Emily for being here again. If you want to show your gratitude towards Emily, please click the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. It's a nice way for us to show gratitude in this webinar. Yep, there's 10, 11, 12 hands going up. I put the link for Emily's work to her Facebook page in the chat, so you can learn more about her work in there. Welcome to everyone who's been on a webinar with us before, and welcome to new folks. We've got about, let's see, 40 or so people in the webinar, 50 on the webinar today. A couple of things I just want to point out before we move on. First, you'll see a chat button at the bottom of your screen. If you're having any technical difficulties, or if you just want to say hi to your fellow participants, use the chat button at the bottom. Make sure you're clicking all panelists and attendees if you're trying to chat with everyone. If you are experiencing any technical difficulties, we will be recording this and posting it online. We've been getting it out by the next day, the last couple of weeks. No promises, but that will probably be the case again. Second, if you click on Q&A at the bottom of your screen, this is where you should put any questions that you have for our speakers today. We're going to make plenty of time for speakers, or for questions rather. And a couple of things you can do inside the Q&A box is upvote other people's questions by clicking the thumbs up. And you can also comment on other people's questions so that if you know the answer, or if you have a resource you want to share with people, we want to create a community here of sharing while we're in this space together. For questions we don't get to today, we'll either follow up with you personally, or we're developing, or we'll get the answer for you and include it in any resources that we're developing. With that, I think I'm going to hand it off to our the Alliance Deputy Director of Civic Engagement, Jonathan Vanderbrug, a popular character on these webinars. Jonathan.
I'm a popular character because I'm one of just a few characters, maybe. No, but thank you, Demi. And thank you so much, Emily, for providing that story. It's one that I can think about the rest of the day. And I think it's a good example of why we just desperately need art at this moment. So thank you very much. And thanks to people on this call too, who continue to provide your artwork, which is needed more than ever. Today, this is another installment in a series of policy webinars that we're providing because this is really a desperate time. It is a crisis across our society. It's a crisis that we in the arts are feeling in particular as people lose their jobs, as organizations struggle to stay afloat. And much of the action that's happening right now is to try to mobilize funds and resources and hopefully leadership at all levels of government. Right now, a lot of the focus at the federal level. And so we're committed to trying to touch base with you on a regular basis to keep you updated on a situation that is incredibly in flux. And so today's another installment of that, where we will focus on the resources and the programs available to nonprofit organizations during this time, and the overall political structure and the policy landscape that surrounds us in the nonprofit sector that's focused on the arts. And so we're very glad to have Bryan today, and also to have Chris, who's been our moderator extraordinaire each week. Before we jump into that, though, I do want to let you know that the Alliance has started a new Facebook group. Demi will provide the link. That Facebook group is one that you can ask to be part of, and we'll kind of let you in, but it's a place where people in the arts community can ask their questions about unemployment. We've already had some people who have shared their experiences with the small business loan process, with the unemployment process. So we really want it to be a place where we can communicate with each other, even in between these webinars. So we want to encourage you to be part of that, to keep this conversation and this community going during this really difficult time. And with that, Chris, I'm going to hand it off to you. Chris is an artist, and very famously, he sung at the very first webinar here, which is still being talked about. But Chris is an artist, a musician. He's also the program officer, with the Alphawood Foundation. And so, Chris, I'm going to hand it over to you to get us started in the meat of this conversation and to take us forward.
Great. Thank you, Jonathan. And thanks again for having me, folks, here. I'm just hoping to facilitate some conversation and help get some of the questions answered. Our resident expert today is Bryan Zarou, and he's the Director of Public Policy and Advocacy at Forefront. He is responsible for advancing Forefront's policy platform and advocacy goals, including building Forefront's relationship with key policymakers at both the state and federal level. And Forefront, if you don't know, is Illinois' statewide association representing both grant makers and nonprofits, as well as their advisors and allies. And its mission is to build a vibrant social impact sector for all the people of Illinois. Hi, Bryan.
How you doing, Chris? Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Do you have a presentation to start us off with, or?
Yeah, I wrote down just a bunch of stuff I'll go over first, and then I know Jonathan, if he made just a quick slide with some pointers, and then after my little mini lecture, we can open it up for questions.
Excellent, great, thank you.
Ready to go?
Looks like it's up and ready.
Okay. So first, I wanted to thank the Arts Alliance and Jonathan. Jonathan and I have been working really close together for the last almost 2 years. I'm almost 2 years over at Forefront. And Forefront and Arts Alliance have had a very long relationship over the years. And I've been really grateful to get to know Jonathan. And we've worked together on UBIT, the unrelated business income tax, last year. And this year, if you're unaware, we are trying to work on the audit situation for nonprofits. So Jonathan and I were really going over that, but now it looks like we won't get anything done until next year. But like Chris said, my name is Bryan Zarou, and I'm the Director of Public Policy and Advocacy over at Forefront. And Forefront is the statewide association for nonprofits and grant makers. And while my job is all policy and advocacy related, we do a large number of things for our membership base, including providing key education to our members. We connect our nonprofits and our funders, and we do what we can to provide them all the tools to fulfill their missions. And lately, with this new pandemic, we have been the key resource throughout the state for advocacy for nonprofits, including the arts, throughout the state of Illinois. And just like I said, I want to thank Jonathan and the Arts Alliance for being a great partner with us, because we can't do it alone. So today I'm going to go over some of the key differences between the few programs that are out there for nonprofits. I'll get into some specifics on what they require. Many of you probably have been on webinars that have heard a lot of this information before. There is some new information that came out today, which I'll go over in a few. And I just want to give just a broad policy update on those programs, what we're doing at the federal level, what we're doing at the state level, and how you can help get our word out. So first, I'm going to go over some key differences between some of their programs. We'll go over some of their statuses and what is going on in Washington, D.C. You'll later into this little speech I'm giving this afternoon is going to be reliant on federal help. The state is limited in its resources. If you don't know, I think it's about 85–90% of the state's revenue comes from sales and income tax. And as you imagine, we're taking a huge hit for the state. So a lot of our efforts are going to be at the federal level to make sure that the states get what they need so that they can help us there. So I'll go over some of the programs first. So first, let's talk about the Payroll Protection Program. You'll know it as PPP. Here at the PPP, there is a 500 employee limit. This decision came from, and this is a big decision, we'll talk about it in a few. This decision came from the chair, Senator Marco Rubio of the Small Business Committee, which is a big point of controversy now, especially for members of the arts, health and human service networks that have over 500 employees. But we'll get into that in a second. So the Payroll Protection Program is a loan at 1% for up to 2 years. The loans are for payroll expenses, for rent, mortgage interest, and other debts that was incurred during the COVID-19 crisis. You apply for the PPP. So if you see on the screen there, it says PPP and EIDL. Right now we're talking about PPP, and I think this is what gets a lot of people confused between the two different programs. So for PPP, it's a loan at 1% up to 2 years, deferred for 6 months. The loans are for payroll and payroll expenses, for rent, mortgage interest, and other debts that was incurred during the COVID-19 crisis. For the PPP, you apply to these loans through your bank, your financial institution. And these loans, the best thing about these loans is something that we've advocated for in the CARES Act, was for these loans, and this is the first time in, I believe, SBA history, these loans will be turned into grants, forgivable grants. So you apply through your financial institution, and then you can ask for forgiveness on these loans. Part of the stipulations for the forgiveness aspect is that you need to keep your full-time employees, and you're going to hear that later on as FTE, full-time employees. You have to keep them at the levels of which you first applied. 75% of the PPP loan that you would get is used for payroll. The other 25% must be used for rent, utilities, mortgage, and those kind of aspects. There will be a formula to calculate the actual forgiveness of those loans. So pay close attention to your bank, have that relationship with your banker, because the formula as of yesterday, I should say, maybe something came out this morning. The actual formula for that forgiveness is not out yet. We don't have that just yet, and we're hoping to get more guidance from the SBA hopefully soon. Some of the information that you're going to hear today may be a little different from what you've heard in the past, simply because the SBA has issued guidelines and they've actually changed some rules around. So this is based off of yesterday's information. So if something came out this morning, it could be a little different. But for the most part, it's generally the same. But it's very important to keep your FTE, your full-time employment level, the same as much as you can. You also have until June 30th. So if you did let people go, you do have until June 30th to get that level back, because they will add a penalty to your loan if you don't have it at those levels. And like I said, the formula isn't released yet. So just pay close attention to your bank, and they should in the future they should have some more guidance. So it's very important to keep your FTE level. So at the forgiveness point, your forgiveness point starts 7 weeks after your first initial payment that you receive. Keep in contact with your bank for the rules of forgiveness, because these will change over the next few months. Maybe not wholeheartedly, but some aspects of it will change, especially as they see glitches in the system. And many of you, I know this is a big topic in the arts world, is the 1099 contractors. Do I count them in my payroll expenses? The answer is no. As of now, the answer is no. 1099 private contractors cannot count toward your payroll expenses. So it's only full-time W-2 employees. The reason for that is the reason they don't count for the 1090, they don't count 1099s in the payroll expenses is because those 1099s can apply for the PPP on their own. So they don't have them as part of the organization. They recommend them to either go on PPP on their own or they can file for unemployment. So this is all based on your PPP is all based on your 12-month history only. There's absolutely no collateral, no personal guarantee, and the limit is $10 million or 2.5 times your payroll. So if your 2.5 times your payroll goes beyond 10 million, your cap is at the $10 million mark. So that's the general gist of the PPP aspect. Let's quickly talk about the economic disaster loan. And like I said before, the PPP, you go through your financial institution. The economic disaster loan, you go to the SBA itself. So we get this question a lot. Can you apply for both? Remember, the EIDL, the answer is yes, you can. But remember, EIDL is not forgivable. The loan aspect is not forgivable. The advance, they can, and I've only heard of very few organizations actually receive that 10,000 advance. That is forgivable, but they just changed that 10,000 to 1,000 per employee up to 10,000. So they did change the rules simply because they're running out of money, and they actually just ran out of money. We'll get into that in a second. If you do apply for both, you'll be able to. Although it's not 100% clear yet on the process of how you can do that, but you can roll it together with the PPP. So if you were successful in one and not the other, or you were successful in both, I'm not a financial wizard, but this is just the information that we're getting from the SBA. Chances are you'd want to take that EIDL money that you get and try to roll it into your PPP. That way it's forgivable, but remember, you have to use it for 75% payroll, 25% mortgage, rent, utilities. The EIDL is through the SBA. These loans can be based on the credit score and the personal guarantee. So I've seen it in two different ways. I've seen it at 200,000, and just most recently I saw it at 500,000. So I'm pretty sure as of today, there's no collateral or personal guarantee up to $500,000. And then the advance, like I said, it was $10,000 within 3 days. I haven't heard anyone get it within those 3 days. I've heard past the 3 days, some people have gotten it, but they've also changed the rules. It is now $1,000 per employee up to $10,000. That aspect is forgivable, that advance loan that you get. Even if you're denied the actual loan itself, that advance would be forgivable, depending on how you use it and what you're using it for. So be careful. Talk to the SBA. And also, we're waiting for more guidance. We're waiting for more guidance on that. So we'll see what happens with that. Let's see. Doesn't seem the case. Simply, we don't know. So we simply don't know what's going to happen with it because in the 2.0 package, right now, the EIDL loan is at 2.75%. We are working to get that loan lowered for nonprofits. I believe for for-profit businesses, it's at 3.5%, but for nonprofits, it's at 2.75%. And that loan is up to $2 million. PPP is up to 10 million or 2.5 times your payroll, depending on what you do. But there is a caveat to all of this right now because we just learned this morning that the SBA program ran out of money. $349 billion is completely depleted. Banks, as I heard this morning, banks are not processing new loans. They will, however, whichever ones they've approved, they should have enough money for it because each bank got allotted a certain amount. But they are not taking new. They're not taking new applications as of now until there's a deal in place. And right now, we are advocating for Senate Republicans and Senate Democrats to solve this issue sooner rather than later. We're hoping. We were on the phone with Senator Durbin earlier this week. I don't remember, to be honest, but it's been a long week. But he's hoping that we have a deal by Friday. tomorrow. But still, it still has to go through the House, and in the House is another story that could take a few days, and then the president has to sign it. So until then, it's just devastating for the sector. It's devastating for your community, for the whole nonprofit sector. That if they're not processing new loans, it's just going to push back the time. And people already have been waiting. Some people haven't gotten anything or any answers yet, but people have applied already 2-3 weeks ago, and they still have gotten nothing. So we're hoping that we know when they will come to a deal. The answer is when, and we're hoping that Friday the Senate comes to a deal and the House comes to a deal much sooner after that. Okay, so that's kind of the two main programs. And right now, banks are not accepting applications. So if you haven't done it yet, keep your eye on our website at Forefront and at the Arts Alliance to find out when they make a deal. And we're going to be up to date once it happens, so that banks, so that people can go straight to their bank and apply again. So that's kind of the two main programs. I want to go over what we've been advocating for. One of the many things we've been doing is advocating to our federal and state officials on the impact this pandemic has made with nonprofits throughout the state. So with the Arts Alliance's help, we have been successful in many key efforts in providing relief, especially in the first 3 packages Washington has put together in terms of COVID relief. And we're currently advocating for a lot more in the 4th package, and I'll get into that. Some of the aspects, along with other sister organizations throughout the country, is making sure that nonprofits are involved in any and all relief efforts. We are currently advocating for nonprofits with more than 500 employees to be eligible for the forgiveness aspect of the PPP loan. Currently, if you have over 500 employees, you're not eligible for the payroll protection program. You would have to go to the economic disaster loan, which is at a 2.75% interest rate. We're currently discussing this with the whole Illinois delegation. We've sent letters, and in fact, we're actually having a call with Senator Durbin with just about 4 or 5 people lucky enough to be on it to advocate for the specific issue with especially Health and Human Services, the arts, all nonprofits who have 500 or more employees, to make sure that they can get the payroll protection aspect with the forgiveness aspect, because it's just devastating to have, especially the health and human service world, to have a 2.75% loan on $1 million that would just devastate their coffers. So we're hoping we'll be successful with that in the 4th package. Currently what's happening is they're discussing the 2.0 package to the 3rd package, if that makes sense. So there was the CARES Act, and what they're discussing right now in the Senate is to just refill the money into the programs they already allotted. So for PPP and economic disaster. So we're hoping that they do that very quickly. So all of the stuff I'm saying now, we're advocating for the 4th package, which is starting in the House of Representatives with Nancy Pelosi. So once I hear more after that phone call next week with Senator Durbin, I will update Jonathan, and I'm sure he'll let your membership know, because that's an important aspect. Another thing we're fighting for is self-insured nonprofits. This is a huge issue in the nonprofit world. Currently, nonprofits who do not pay into their state unemployment system would have to pay out of their pockets to cover the wages of those who were fired, let go, or who go on unemployment. Before the CARES Act, nonprofits were on the hook for 100% of the cost. And that would have been devastating for nonprofits. So through advocating and making phone calls and sitting down with our federal leaders and the help of the National Council of Nonprofits, we were able to have the federal government provide money to the states in the CARES Act that would provide 50% of the cost to the nonprofits. Still, the nonprofits are on the hook for 50% of the cost. And we're currently talking again to advocate for the other 50% to be covered in the 4th CARES package. So as of right now, you're on the hook for 50% of that. And we're trying to do what we can to cover the other 50%, or get as close to as we can. But that can only be done on the federal level. Well, the state can do it, but the state needs the money from the federal government. And that's why we're putting all of our efforts into the federal government to provide more money for the states. So another thing we're doing is we're also advocating for the Sos Act. This is something new by Representative Seth Moulton and Brian Fitzpatrick from Pennsylvania. It's a bipartisan bill. It's called the SOS Act, which is called the Save the Organizations That Serve Act. This bill allows expanding nonprofit access to relief and support through all federal aid. It does cover the other half of the unemployment insurance, which is good, and it strengthens the charitable deduction by raising it. Currently, we raised it in the CARES Act only for a very, I think for 6 months to $300. We're trying to raise that much, much more in this fourth act. The bill also adds $60 billion in nonprofit relief, specifically for nonprofits through the SBA, and we're hoping that happens as well. So we're hoping that this bill really makes it into the fourth package. The fourth bill is originating in the House, and we've actually sent letters to Speaker Pelosi, our counterparts in California, who are South Carolina nonprofits, the big organization there, San Diego nonprofits, and Southern California nonprofits, I believe. They have a really good relationship with the Speaker, so they've actually pushed us as well. So we're hoping that we get this bill passed, or get pieces of this bill into the fourth CARES package. That's what we're hoping. Once we hear more, we sent federal comments, and you can do the same, and I can send this information to Jonathan. We're sending comments to the federal government on the fourth package, and we're actually awaiting Nancy Pelosi's response to that act, this SOS Act. So we'll see what she says on it, and we're hoping that she takes some of it into consideration. So what's going on the federal side here in Illinois? That's what's going on the federal side. Here in Illinois, we're in a little different situation. We're asking the state to pay the other 50% of the unemployment insurance. So what happens is, just so you're aware, the federal government is mandating the states pay 50% from the money that they've already received. The state technically can go past 50, they have to pay up to 50%. They can pay 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. They can if they want to. But it's really reliant on the money that comes in, simply because we're in a horrible financial crisis here in Illinois. So we're pushing our state lawmakers. We're really going to push them after the fourth CARES package to find out what happens there. And if we're not successful there, then we have to go to the state and find a way to pay for the other 50%. So that's something that we're doing at the state level in Springfield. We're asking more. We are also asking for more relaxed rules for nonprofit contracts. Some agencies have already given us that leeway. Illinois Department of Human Services has continued to pay contracts, which is good, which helps nonprofits tremendously. And we're asking for more relaxed rules when it comes to monitoring and reporting on any and all state contracts, along with our funder world as well. So we're also working on that. We're gonna be asking our Springfield, when we go to Springfield, a more specific asks, but the challenge is knowing what the federal government will do. It's hard to dictate what the state can do based on what the federal government does. So we're gonna wait for the 2.0 package and the fourth package, and then we can really grasp, hopefully by then, we'll be back at work. Hopefully we'll be allowed to go back to Springfield, and we'll try to advocate for you there. In closing, if you want to take a look at our website, we update it every day with the most valuable information, webinars, how-tos on the SBA loans, up-to-date policy updates, and all of the different funds throughout the state. We've actually have a great piece on our website that separates it by county. We're a statewide organization. I know Arts Alliance of Illinois is as well. So you can go and find your fund through your county on our website. That way, and they're doing tremendous work with that. So it's there's about, as of a couple days ago, I checked that there was about 35 different funds throughout the state that we have on our website. So you could check that out. And it also has applications, deadlines, who can apply, and all that kind of information. So you can check that out on myforefront.org. And our goal is really to make all this information as streamlined as possible to help all of our nonprofits throughout the state. So you'll see more updates later this week. We just had our state treasurer on a phone call earlier, or was it last week, to discuss all what his office is doing. The information there is pretty valuable. The state treasurer is also putting together a deposit program. The link that he sent us was for the actual banker. So Jonathan, once I get the link for the applications, I'll send that over to you. So they're going to have a COVID relief fund as well to the state treasurer's office. So we'll find, and that's actually through smaller banks, I believe, so that smaller nonprofits can go to the small banks and try to get money that way. I'm available by email, by phone call. I know Jonathan has my information out there. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer as many of your questions as possible. I know there's probably gonna be a lot of questions on the SBA and the payroll protection. I'll do my best to answer as many as I can. But if I don't have an answer, I can always find out for you and email you back. I know a lot of them are probably pretty specific, but I'll do the best I can. So that's all I have for now.
Bryan, thank you so much for the presentation, and especially for all the advocacy you're doing for nonprofit organizations. It's really, really good work and really necessary right now. We do have a couple questions that came through, if you have a moment.
Yeah, of course.
This one's from Ben. It says, we were recently given guidance that you can actually save up to 25% to pay down principal and interest on other loans you had to take out. Any way to verify? I think he's talking about the either the PPP loan, and you can use 25% to pay down loans and interests.
Yeah, so you can use, well, I don't know if it's loan and interest, but I know it's other debt the language is very broad. Other debt incurred during the COVID-19 crisis. That's all I can really say on that. I'm not sure exactly what that entails, but when more guidance comes out, I can provide more. But also, please, please, please talk to your banks, because you don't want to end up in a situation where they say, oh, that's covered and this is not. So, and like I said, the SBA, their guidance is so flaky. So it's very, but I can look that up and I can get back to whoever that is, Jonathan, if you want.
Thank you.
Oh, Jonathan, you're on mute.
Yeah, pop that mute button.
I do know, just to add to what Bryan said, he's exactly right. I do know that it is available for use, that 25% for mortgage payments. So in terms of that type of debt, or you can use it towards mortgage and utilities and things like that.
Thanks for the clarity. We got another question from Bryan. They applied on March 28th for the EIDL. And then they were told that any applications before then were thrown out. So they reapplied, and they're wondering if their place in line was not lost, if they are,
I know they're doing it on a first come, first served basis, but before, I mean, it was thrown, I never heard that. So they did it before March 28th and it was thrown out. They had to redo it. Right.
They said that any application filed before March 30th were thrown out because of the rules that changed.
I'm writing that down because I've never heard that. So let me find out, because I have the, tomorrow I'm on a phone call with the SBA administrator for Illinois, so I can ask that question tomorrow. I'm sorry that I don't know the answer to that, but I'll find out.
Yeah.
I mean, this might have something to do with it. Is that I do know they launched kind of one application process, and then they switched.
They did.
And so it got really confusing. And I know at one point, you probably heard this too, Bryan, I was on an SBA call, and they were saying, well, if you have submitted an application through this old process, some of that would be brought forward. So there's been some confusion there. So let me know what you find out too, Bryan, and I'll let you know, let everybody know.
And just for the record, I was with the SBA guy a couple days ago, and some of the answers, he was flat out and told us that a lot of this is still ambiguous. They don't even understand a lot of it, which is crazy. Yeah.
I mean, Bryan and I were talking earlier earlier today, and I was mentioning that if you're in policy and programs, you've probably in your career haven't said more often, I don't know, I'll get back to you, because they're trying to move $2 trillion very quickly, and a lot of these programs are they're not defined, but we'll get back to you. Thanks, Bryan.
No problem.
Another good question here. Any knowledge on whether having your SBA registration number assigned means that you made it into the pool before the initial cap on loans?
I would imagine so. Yeah. Well, so the banks did come out and say the people who have applied, so the banks were only giving applications while they had cash flow. So now they're not taking any because there's no new money coming in, but some banks have said that whoever has brought in, they're still going through those applications. So you would assume that they would have money for those people, but anyone after today, not until they replenish. So I would imagine, so if you made it to the SBA portion, because the bank has to send it to the SBA for the payroll protection piece. So if you did get an SBA number, I would imagine that you're probably in the system.
Great, thanks for that. And if you get if you get a confirmation on that, please let us know so we can pass that information forward, because there's a lot of moving pieces and unknowns and variables. So the more clarity we can get together, the better off we'll be.
And this, if I could, Chris, I'll make a plug too for the Facebook group, because I'm noticing that we're getting, starting to get some comments in there about this is what I'm encountering and this is, what I'm seeing. But I do think that this is a situation where apply for it if you think if you need it, apply for it. Even though we're not hearing that funds are available, I don't know about you, Bryan. I have some confidence that the pressure is so high at this point that they will provide more funding. I think, don't quote me on that, but you want to be in line when that funding comes. So keep talking to your bank. If you are not connected with the bank, we have a link that can help you get connected that shows the available lenders. Be perseverant, keep applying, keep moving forward.
The sooner you're there, the better off you are. So once they actually come to a deal and replenish and banks are taking applications, be the first in line. And the truth is, take the EIDL as well. Even if you're not taking a loan, take that advance, because you can always put it into the payroll protection aspect and that could be forgivable. That way, at least you have just, well, it's not 10,000 anymore, but at least you'll get something. And then you can also have that forgiven if you roll it into the PPP. So the more you do, the better off you are, because you don't know where your place is in line.
That's a great point.
Bryan, we don't have any other questions that have come through yet, so I'm going to ask one. Do you have any, is there any general advice that you could give, or have you seen any common issues in your work with either applying for some of the opportunities?
Hope, I guess I could provide a little bit of hope. I know the governor has really, well, for a few different things. The governor has really expanded the unemployment system that they have at the state. So hopefully, I know, and they're extremely backed up. So hopefully that will help a lot of people, because I know a lot of people have been really just down and out in terms of not being able to get through, not getting their applications, especially for the pandemic relief fund, the pandemic unemployment whatever it's called, pandemic unemployment insurance. New York, it's up and running. My family's there in New York. Theirs is up and running. I know people who have gotten that pretty streamlined, but here it's been a little rough. But I know that the governor's doing a lot, everything he can to try to make things a lot easier for people. And I know I have hope in Washington, D.C. in terms of they will come to it. I mean, they will add more money. The question is how long it's going to take. I mean, it should, hopefully by this weekend, you would imagine that they would strike a deal by this weekend. Yeah. And we just got some word. So Wisconsin has extended their stay-at-home order to May 20th. Governor of Illinois, Governor of Michigan, Governor of Wisconsin, Governor of Ohio have, another governor, Kentucky, I believe, have gotten together and created a Midwestern pact to start reopening the economy. Wisconsin just released some guidelines, and I believe that our governor will also issue some guidelines as well. It's going to be, let's just say, like an economic soft open, right? So they'll have some people going back in phases. I know the president is giving a press conference at 6 p.m. today but pretty much everything I've heard so far is that he's giving it to the governors to make it up to them so that they could start reopening. So, and I know and this whole SBA thing has been a big mess, but I guess my last piece of advice is just apply and see what happens. And do yourself a favor, do not apply. I found this out yesterday. Do not apply more than once. If you haven't received anything, if you submitted your application, you haven't received any confirmation or anything, they're saying don't do it again, because then once they get your application, they put you in the system, they realize that they have 2 others, and then it's just going to expedite it's going to screw up the process from what I was told yesterday. So, I mean, I guess that's all I can provide, but we're doing everything we can at Forefront, and the conversations I'm having with legislators and state senators and state representatives and our 2 senators, they're doing everything they can for the sector. We've never had a negative conversation with them about no, this can't happen or this can happen, but they've been really supportive, and we hope that we can all get on our feet pretty soon and head back to work.
Yeah, I agree. So yeah. I do, Chris, if I can jump in, you brought up a good question about unemployment. I can cover that a little bit too. I don't know if you're able to stay on, Brian, but I do have a slide on unemployment if that helps, because there's been some developments as Brian indicated.
Oh, for me?
Oh no, I was saying, I'm sorry, is that okay, Chris?
Yeah, go for it. Absolutely.
I did, and I think, let me bring it up here. Here we go. Are you seeing that at all? I'll try to start it up here.
Yeah, we got that, Jonathan.
Okay. First of all, in case you have to go, Brian, I'm just going to really sneak in and say just a quick thank you.
Thank you very much.
We're so fortunate as an arts sector, nonprofit sector, to have you as our voice. The bill last year got through was so fast, and that was because you were a force of nature on that, making that happen. So we're really honored to work with you in Forefront. You're a great leader. So thank you, and we'll keep at it.
Thank you. Thank you to everybody. And like I said, Jonathan, if anybody has any questions or comments or concerns or anything anything that we're forgetting that we're not advocating for, let me know so that we can push it through.
That sounds great. That sounds great. So what you have in front of you here is unemployment is obviously incredibly important to our sector, to the arts sector. We have, it's almost every day that I talk to someone, probably you talk to someone, or if you're someone yourself who've lost work. And we as an arts sector have a particular interest in unemployment benefits that have been expanded to gig workers, freelance workers. And there's a lot of information going back and forth about different unemployment programs. So I wanted to just break it down really quickly so you know that's what's available, and then give you some dates in terms of when things are supposed to become online if they're not online already. And this has changed from day to day. There are basically 3 unemployment programs, additional things in addition to what Illinois does, that have been put into play by the CARES Act. Unemployment, as we talked about last week, is something that the states really have most of the jurisdiction on. But these 3 components are federally funded. The first one, you'll see this table here. The first one is Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation, if you happen to hear about that. What that basically is it's an extension of the current unemployment. Every state has a different amount. Illinois has 26 weeks. You're now eligible for an additional 13 weeks on top of that. The DOL, the Department of Labor, issued rules, and those rules have been confusing all along, but they expect in the computer system to get that going next week so that you can extend those benefits. The second one deals with not length of time, but amount of time. It's the federal pandemic unemployment compensation. It's the $600 that the federal government is providing in addition to the benefits that the state applies. That can go back to March 29, so it can be retroactive if you've lost work at that time. But what's really important is it only goes until July 25. So this is another reason why we want to see a phase 4 or a second CARES Act to see if this can be extended, this unemployment coverage. That is implemented now, that is underway. So if you're getting unemployment, you should be receiving $600 extra. If you're applying now, you should expect to get that. The other thing that's really important to note that we talked about last week that I've heard others kind of ask about too, is that you don't have to wait to get unemployment. You used to have to wait 7 days to get it. You don't now. And then the third one, which there's been some developments over the last few days, is particularly important to our sector in a way because we have a lot of contract workers. And that's the pandemic unemployment assistance. And you heard Brian talk a little bit about that. It is the extension of coverage to gig workers, to freelance workers, independent contractors, and sole proprietors. This has been really, really tough because we're not a population that the Illinois Department of Employment and Security has worked with before, and they had no systems set up. So that has still not been made available. So we should have had insurance coverage available for independent contractors now. That's not there yet. And the Pritzker administration did announce the creation of a new call center. They are now contracting with a private firm in order to set up the system to handle applications from gig workers. The struggle, though, is that they don't expect there to be benefits to be fully implemented until the week of May 11. And if you're a gig worker trying to make ends meet, that's a tough period to wait. So what we encourage you to do is to still apply for unemployment benefits, for the regular unemployment benefits. One part that we disagreed with the CARES Act, but was included in the CARES Act, is that in order to be eligible for this pandemic unemployment assistance, you have to basically prove that you're not eligible for regular assistance, for regular benefits. And the clearest way to do that, as IDES has said, is to apply for those regular benefits and be rejected. There's your de facto evidence that you don't qualify. And then you can qualify for this PUA. That's a pain in the rear, but it's something that has to occur. So even though the unemployment benefits are not available for gig workers yet, please apply. You will be rejected, but it's one step that we have to go through in order for you to get those PUA, those benefits, as frustrating that is. So do that now if you can, so you don't have to wait beyond. So I just wanted to cover those three because there are so many people in our sector who need these benefits. So let's see. Is Chris still on the line? I am going to pull up.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. What I'm going to do is, do we have any other questions that have come in? Otherwise, I can take some from last week.
Oh, we got one more. Is there any guidance for people who are W-2 employees, but also complement their earnings as an independent contractor? Mm-hmm. How should they determine what to apply for if they held on to one side but not the other?
That's a really great question. I don't necessarily have a firm answer on that. We'll look at that. It's really going to come down to what their income is. If they have a W-2, but they hold on to that job and it's the vast majority of their income, and their contract work is a very small amount of that, that might be harder to prove. So I think it's really going to depend on the amount that is independent contractor attributed and the amount that's W-2. Mm. If under the self-employed part of being eligible for some of these programs, you have to show a certain degree of loss of income. So, but I'll look into that as well. But I think that it's probably a case that's going to come down to numbers. What are the numbers under the W-2? What are the numbers under the independent contractor? Yeah, and we do have situations that's actually quite common where we have artists who, and this may be the case, where we have artists who, as contractors, perform their music, etc. So they have income that way. They've lost that. And then on top of that, they may say work for something in the hospitality industry where they've lost that job as well. And so, that's going to position them for unemployment. It's going to, again, apply for the regular unemployment benefits and then see what happens.
Thanks. That's good.
We do have some questions from last week. We always say that if we, let's see, are you still seeing my screen or are we all set? I handed it back to you? I've handed it back to you. We have also heard some reports that people are receiving what some people call their economic stimulus checks. We've talked about that before, where individual taxpayers are entitled to $1,200 up to a certain level. Some people have received those checks. Others have not. It's really going to depend upon when you filed your taxes. I was talking to someone today, I forgot who, but you want to make sure that your direct deposit number is right, because I did talk to someone the other day and their direct deposit was actually incorrect. They hadn't confirmed it with the IRS. So what was supposed to come into their account didn't. And there is a website, I believe it's up now, but I believe it's up now, but if it's not, the IRS is committed to do it, where you can actually go to the site, and we can post the link when we find it, or through the Facebook group or at the next webinar, where you can go and confirm or provide your direct deposit information, so that that stimulus check can be given to you. So one of the questions, we've had actually 3 questions that I've heard come up both with the last webinar, but also from other sources. I just want to make sure that we have had people ask, can a sole proprietor apply for the PPP? And I can't believe I had to say that sentence, sole proprietor provide for the PPP. That's a lot of alliteration, but the answer is yes, you can. And we talked about get in line and apply. So that was the first one. The second is that they asked if there's, for the PPP, is it the independent contractor that files, or does the organization? And the question that they asked was about when they should file. And again, I think we've covered that as well. There was a question too about, someone asked that they read online that the IDES uses the average of the last 2 quarters worked. Has this also changed to the average of the last 4 quarters worked? It's a really technical question, but I did want to get back to you on that. The answer is that the base amount of unemployment will be calculated the same. It's a very kind of complex formula, but basically what it does is it looks at the 2 highest earnings that you had in the last 4 quarters. So it looks at the last 4 quarters prior, and then it takes the 2 highest quarters of earnings, and then it actually, it'll walk you through, but it actually applies a formula. You take about half of that, 47% of that, and then you divide it by 26 to get your payment. So that's what they're going to look at. There is a maximum in Illinois, and those maximums are $484 for individuals, $577 for an individual with a spouse they support, and $669 for an individual child. So there, you have to be aware that there are maximums. So we covered that a little bit last week, but those are ones that I wanted to make sure that we answered. I'm going to hand it back to you, Krish. I want to be cognizant of time.
Yeah, so it's 4:30. We don't have any questions left, so I think that's about it, unless you had anything else you wanted to offer, folks. Oh wait, one more here just came in.
Got into the wire.
Is there any way to see whether I think they're talking about the Arts Illinois Relief Fund was approved?
That I don't know. The Arts for Illinois Relief Fund, which was a fund that Arts Alliance Illinois worked with the city of Chicago, with the state, with the Pritzker family, with many different foundations. Individuals can apply for it through 3 Arts, and nonprofits through the Arts Work Fund. Currently, right now, the applications for individuals has been just stopped temporarily. Many more requests or applications were received than the funds that were available, which is testament to the need that's out there. But it will get going again. So it's been paused, but that will get going again. I don't know, Demi, if there's anything you want to say about that. Demi's been active in that.
Yeah. So like Jonathan says, the individual, and actually as of yesterday, the organizational portals are both temporarily closed to give us time to give 3 Arts and Arts Work Fund time to review the applications. I know for the individual applications, they're hoping to have notifications out definitely by the end of the month. So by the end of April, they're actually hoping to get the first wave of payments out by the end of April. But you'll definitely know in the next week or two. And then like Jonathan says, both portals will open again. That will happen on May 4th. I think that's a Monday. And so, yeah, this time right now, we're taking for the 3 Arts and Arts Work Fund to review applications, and then we're also trying to fundraise as well to be able to meet the need that Jonathan's talking about there. Obviously, if you've applied already for Arts for Illinois, when the portal opens again, you won't have to apply again. So you're all set. If you know anyone who can donate to the fund, we really want to encourage as many donations, but obviously there's plenty of need out there as well. So that's where we're at with Arts for Illinois.
And one of the things that if I could, we're going a little bit over, but that's okay. This is important. Is that you talked a lot about the federal programs today. And what we've seen in this crisis is oftentimes cases on the public health side where the federal government is not stepping up. We're seeing states and localities step up, even when the federal government is doing a good job in some places. But don't forget the state-generated programs and the locally generated programs if you are a nonprofit. The state actually has 2 programs that are really designed for downstate. And there's the Illinois Small Business Emergency Loan Fund. And there's also a little bit more technical one, but the Downstate Small Business Stabilization Grant Program, which is not a loan, it's a grant program. If you're downstate, don't forget those. I have not yet heard that they haven't, as far as I know, shut down applications for those. So keep those in mind. If you're in Chicago, you're a small business, keep in mind the Chicago Small Business Resiliency Fund. That's another resource. So it's not just the federal government resources. We have information about those 3 different opportunities in our small business FAQ, which is available through the Alliance. We sent it out through our newsletter. But we're also, the last thought is as we continue to advocate for the field, one of the things that's very important to us is the concern of equity. We're concerned that the first come, first served model for the PPP I think has been very unfair. It's been unfair to small organizations. It's been unfair to organizations in some of the communities that are getting hit hardest by COVID, are also some of the communities that have been victimized by the private banking system for a long time, and yet they have to go through it. So one of the things that I think we're very interested in seeing, and I know a lot of our partners are seeing, is that not that this money goes out again in some free-for-all of the strongest get in first, but that the money can, at least part of the money, and there's proposals for this in Congress, that part of the money go through banks that have community interests at stake. They call them CDFIs, or that be designated to communities that have been hit harder by this crisis. So that's one of the things that's very important to us and that we're also advocating for. But please know that we are advocating for you. My email address is up there. Contact me anytime. All of you are on the front lines with your nonprofit in an extremely difficult time, and we want to know that we'll continue to fight for you in these very important weeks of advocacy that are ahead. So with that, Demi, I think are there any more housekeeping? I know we'll have more webinars coming, and if people have particular topics of concern or questions, they can feel free to email us too. I know, but I'll hand it back to you.
Great, yeah. We'll send out a recording probably tomorrow. And as always, email Jonathan, email myself, email the info@artsalliance.org email with any questions, any topics you'd like to see us cover in future webinars.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.